Before we get started, just a reminder that the purpose of the monthly strategy reports is not to create or reinforce any kind of fear, but rather that we would recognize the potential challenges so that we could apply faith and wisdom, be led by the Holy Spirit to have a successful outcome, to navigate the challenge, that we wouldn't be blindsided, but again, rather by the pursuit and leading of the Holy Spirit, we would have individual solutions to navigate the challenges. In the particular challenge or issue that we're going to look at in this episode will have wide-ranging implications, not all of which we can successfully understand and predict at this time. And the implications will actually go on for years to come. The economists are calling it the silver tsunami. Now, the data I'm going to share is very America-centric. However, we need to keep in mind that as the world's largest economy, the economic issues and challenges that flow out of America impact all economies to greater and lesser degrees. So what is the silver tsunami, and what are just some of the reasons why we need to recognize we need to challenge some of our own foundational assumptions that guide our financial and economic decisions? The silver tsunami, as economists are calling it, is the understanding that in just a few years, by 2030, 75 million Americans will be over the age of 65. In fact, there will be more Americans over 65 than under 18. Now, this has broad implications. Now, at a very superficial level, it's easy to recognize that as people move into a retirement mindset, whether they're actually able to retire or not, but as they get that mindset, it begins to change their spending patterns, their investment decisions, how they handle their money. So that's just one very straightforward implication. But there are much greater issues. And let's look at just one issue. That of those 75 million Americans, only about 15% are estimated to have the financial resources to pay for their own aging care. That they would have the resources to pay for the extra care that may be required above and beyond anything they may get from, say, government benefits. And to dig down deeper, here's a great example. That over their lifetime, an estimated 70% of that 75 million will need at some point in their lifetime long-term care. But only about 10% are estimated to have the ability to pay for that, whether it's through long-term care coverage or the financial assets. So we have an issue that is underlying. And we'll look at just one implication, mostly to help us understand how it needs to challenge our assumptions going forward, recognizing that some of the most fundamental things that we automatically assume may no longer be valid. And that's the impact on real estate. Now, let me say, I'm not saying that real estate won't have any appreciation here or there, but let's just dig into the possible outcomes as many economists are projecting. Now, so real estate in America, as in many places, has been quite distorted by events over the last number of years. We went through this extended period of ultra-low interest rates, which had the adverse effect of driving values through the roof. And so what it did is it created this emotional response of the need to have more, bigger, greater, better. And so people mortgaged all they could to get the best house they could. But then that fueled inflation, which in a very short period of time drove interest rates through the roof. And what we're creating now is a phenomenon. Now, real estate is always local, and it has different impacts in different areas. But specifically in America, it's created this phenomenon where people are unwilling, even if they're interested in moving, they're unwilling to sell their house, to let it go with that great mortgage to get another house they may love more, but at a significantly higher rate. So what we're seeing is a profound lack of inventory. That on one hand, prices aren't really appreciating because not enough people are willing to sell for buyers to drive the price higher, but at the same time, prices aren't really truly softening that much. Now, always there are exceptions to the rule, but prices aren't softening that much for the very same reason. Not enough people are willing to sell for there to be enough inventory on the market to drive prices lower. So we're in this kind of locked battle at the moment because of this ultra low inventory. Now, recognizing also that one of the implications over this long-term trend of real estate appreciation is this basic fundamental assumption that years ago, people bought a home because it was a home. And the mentality kind of shifted, it molded a bit. And it became that people bought a home for a home with the concept that when we're ready to sell, it will surely be worth much more than what we paid for it. It became, again, a fundamental assumption in the purchasing process. And what if that is no longer the case? Now, again, I'm not saying there will be no price appreciation. Please don't interpret it that way. But I want us to focus on understanding how fundamentally this needs to challenge our basic assumptions. And so how does this affect real estate? Well, an estimated 56% of all homes in America are owned by people over 60 years old. Now remember though, hang on, an estimated 70% of those will need some kind of extra care like long-term care, and many of those won't have the ability to pay for it. And so what do we see? Now, some of them will have enough equity that they can successfully downsize and not necessarily get a bigger mortgage. So that will have a minor effect on real estate, but the greater effect will be over a period of time, seniors selling, liquidating to fund life expenses that literally that home now becomes an asset to pay for their life expenses, whether it's the retirement itself or medical care, etc., associated with aging. And so many economists are looking for a long-term trend, literally 15 to 20 years of overall gentle, they're not calling for a crash, but overall a gentle decline in real estate values. That literally the assumption changes, the equation changes on when you're looking at what you're paying for a house. That if you were to take out any of price appreciation, we move back to the model of buying a home for a home and possibly moving into the zone of recognizing it may or may not appreciate at all during our tenure, during our time of ownership. And that needs to, again, profoundly impact how we make that decision. If you think about it, like for rental properties, those who love being landlords, rental property is primarily composed of two components. One is obviously cash flow income produced, but the other has been for many, many years, recognizing if the cash flow works through the bumps, that price appreciation is the greater long-term value, that short-term it's got cash flow, but the long-term is paying for itself and the values are appreciating. What if we enter into a zone where that price appreciation is no longer a guaranteed assumption, that it may or may not happen? And now then we have to make the decision we should move into. Actually, I believe if you're looking at rental property, we need to already be moving into the zone of looking at it strictly on a cash flow basis and recognizing if we get appreciation out of it, that's just a bonus. Now again, I'm just using real estate as one example of understanding how profoundly our financial and economic assumptions need to be reevaluated. Many economists are saying that does the stock market enter into an extended period of low returns as retirees focus less on growth and just on security, just on cash flow? Again, the point of this episode is to just highlight a fundamental demographic shift that is happening in most of the world as we talk. It's happening already. We're only beginning to see the consequences of it. But rather that we would be ahead of the curve. Not in having all of the answers, but recognizing by the leading of the Holy Spirit, by the willing to understand that many of our assumptions may no longer be valid, and making our decisions by the leading of the Holy Spirit rather than those very set, in concrete foundational assumptions we've lived with for years. Recognizing we can still prosper. It's God who gives us the power to get wealth, that ability, the strength, all that we need to fulfill our life mission. And it's done through the leading of the Holy Spirit. And it's the recognition that we need to, more than ever, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit and to set aside our common sense, our assumptions, the way we've always done it, and recognize many of the rules will be turned on their head.